In 1996, the world wasn't quite ready for what would become a global phenomenon, Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue. The brainchild of Satoshi Tajiri, a man who spent much of his own childhood collecting bugs. As said, the idea for Pokemon grew from his desire to share the joy of collection and discovery. But instead of finding bugs in your backyard, you can now collect creatures called Pokemon and battle them, because why just watch bugs crawl around when you can make them fight? Nintendo, seeing the genius behind Tajiri's vision, or perhaps just intrigued by the idea of a Pikachu plush toy, gave the project the green light. Originally released as Pokemon Red and Green in Japan, these games were slow to catch on, but eventually sparked a craze. When they hit the western shores as Pokemon Red and Pokemon Blue in 1998, players were introduced to an alternate reality. One where a 10-year-old could freely roam the world with little more than a Pokédex and a dream. The development process wasn't all smooth sailing though. In fact, Game Freak, the studio behind the games, faced numerous hurdles, including budget restraints and technical limitations. The cartridge could barely fit all 151 Pokemon, which is why you probably wonder why some poor creatures were relegated to the wilds of later releases. The decision to split the game into two versions was a stroke of marketing genius, or manipulation depending on your view, as it forced players to trade with friends, and to catch 'em all, thus cementing its status as the ultimate playground social currency. Sure, you start with your faithful companion, Charmander, Squirtle, or Bulbasaur, and choose wisely, because the decision could define your childhood. But then came the true challenge, capturing wild Pokemon with the measly 20 Pokeballs you could afford, after splurging on potions and antidotes. Remember the first time you tried to catch an Abra? You found it, your heart's racing, your hand trembling as you select to throw the Pokeball. But then, just as you imagined yourself as a proud owner of a psychic powerhouse, it teleports. No battle, no epic struggle, it just vanished. This was Pokemon Red and Blue in a nutshell, moments of pure joy, interspersed with the rage of an ill-timed critical hit, or a failed capture, that would leave you wondering if the universe had a personal vendetta against you. The game also taught us that some Pokemon just weren't meant to be caught easily. Moltres, Articuno, and Zapdos, the legendary birds, they were like rock stars of the Pokemon world. You'd spend hours tracking them down, only to realize that they weren't going to join your team without putting up a fight, or eating through your entire stockpile of Ultra Balls. And don't even get me started on Mewtwo, the ultimate test of endurance and sheer luck. Only the bravest and most obsessive trainers would ever claim them all. Once you assembled your team of 6, you are ready to take on gym leaders and the Elite Four, the pinnacle of Pokemon battling. But then the reality set in. You needed a strategy. Suddenly, button mashing wasn't enough, and the moves like Tackle and Growl that you got through in the early game were about as useful as a Magikarp in a championship fight. Gym battles were often a brutal wake-up call. Take Lieutenant Surge for example, whose Raichu could obliterate your team with the speed and fury of a child who just had their Game Boy taken away. You'd stand there, desperately hoping your over-leveled Pidgeotto could handle it, only to watch it get zapped into oblivion. So lesson learned, always have a solid team, and maybe a strategy that involves a little more than just hoping for a lucky critical hit. Of course, nothing compared to the terror of facing your in-game rival Gary, or Blue, depending on how original you wanted to be when you named him. Gary seemed to pop up at the most inconvenient times, always with a stronger, more diverse team than yours. He was the embodiment of smugness, taunting you with the superior tactics and impeccable timing. Defeating him was the ultimate satisfaction, a digital victory that felt as sweet as anything real life could offer. For all its charm and complexity, Pokemon Red and Blue were famously buggy. Some glitches were harmless fun, like the infamous Missing No, a harmless, mysterious sprite that when encountered could multiply your items. Hello, infinite rare candies, but also risk corrupting your save file. It was a gamble, and one that many players were more than willing to take for the promise of infinite Master Balls. Then there was the Mew glitch. Sure, Mew was a mythical Pokemon, but who needed official events to get it when you could exploit a perfectly legal in-game quirk? By carefully manipulating teleportation in certain trainers, players could summon Mew from the digital ether like a wizard summoning a dragon. The sheer joy of discovering and sharing these glitches made players feel like hackers, before hacking was even cool. But despite the bugs, these quirks became part of the game's charm. They were like insider secrets, a digital version of urban legends passed around the schoolyard. The glitches, far from breaking the game, made it feel alive, as if Pokemon Red and Blue held more secrets than any guidebook could ever reveal. It's hard to overstate the impact Pokemon Red and Blue had on the gaming industry, and on pop culture at large. These games didn't just sell millions of copies, they launched a franchise that would go on to include animated TV shows, movies, trading card games, plush toys, and more Pikachu merchandise than anyone ever thought the world needed. But clearly, the world needed it. For many, Pokemon was more than just a game. It was a childhood ritual, a shared experience that connected kids in the playground and around the world. Trading Pokemon via link cable was revolutionary. There was nothing quite like the excitement of seeing that transfer animation as your friend sent the elusive Gengar in exchange for the less exciting Pidgeotto. It was social gaming, before online multiplayer became the norm. The legacy of Red and Blue endures not just through the countless sequels and remakes, but also in the hearts of the players who spent hours leveling up their teams, navigating through dark caves without Flash, and debating the superiority of Blastoise over Charizard. In the world of video games, few titles have had such a lasting impact, and fewer still have made grown adults proudly declare that, yes, they still know all 151 original Pokemon by heart. Pokemon Red and Blue weren't just video games, they were a way of life. They taught us patience when the Safari Zone didn't, strategy, or at least how to button mash with purpose, and perseverance, because catching Chansey required the patience of a saint. They were the games that caught us all, whether we wanted to be the very best, or simply liked the idea of hanging out with a gang of adorable, albeit dangerous creatures. And while the franchise has evolved over the years, with new regions, new Pokemon, and even a few new types, the nostalgia of those original games remains unrivaled. Whether you're still trying to get that perfect IV Pikachu, or reminiscing about that one time your Rattata took down a Mewtwo with a Hyper Fang, it could happen, right? Pokemon Red and Blue will forever hold a special place in our hearts. Or at the very least, they'll forever be the reason why the sound of a Game Boy starting up still gives you a rush of excitement. Pokemon Red and Blue are really big in my childhood, so making this video brought back a lot of memories. I was always a big fan of picking Squirtle as my starter. Let me know who you picked down in the comments. I'm gonna let the title screen for Pokemon Blue play here for a minute or two, and if you grew up in the late 90s and early 2000s like I did, I bet you could probably name all of these Pokemon. Take a minute and see if you can. Don't forget to hit that like button, and subscribe if you want to see more. I'm John from John Does Game Dev, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.